Hi everybody, thank you so much for clicking onto this video. Today I will be reviewing the Carry On series by Rainbow Rowell. Now currently she's got two books released, so I've got them here. I've got the first one, which is Carry On, which was released in 2015, and the second book, Wayward Son, which was released in 2019, so quite recently. I believe the third book, Any Way the Wind Blows, will be released in July. I know that I know that the book was initially set to release in 2022, just is going to be released in July 2021 instead, which is great for all of us Carry On fans because we did have to wait a really long time in between the first book and the sequel, and I actually didn't even think that we would ever get a sequel, and I don't think Rainbow Rowell herself anticipated that the series would be going where it is now. So yeah, I will just get into it. I will split the book reviews in terms of book one and book two. I won't really combine my opinions on both of them together because I do believe that they are two very, very different books in the way that they were created and written and just things like that. So I think that I will just get straight to it, and I hope you enjoy this review. So I'll start off with Carry On, which was the first book in the series, and it was released in 2015. Now, the book Carry On actually had a completely different life of its own well before this book actually got published, because it was actually created, and the characters in this book were actually created within a different book called Fangirl, which was also written by Rainbow Rowell, and she published that book in 2013. And it's all about this girl called Kath who goes to college, and she has a huge following online because she writes fan fiction about these two characters, Simon and Baz, who are characters from a very popular fictional series within the universe of Fangirl, and it's called the Simon Snow series. And it's all about wizards who go to a wizard school and practice magic. And Simon and Baz are roommates in this wizard school, and Kath kind of, creates this world, like not really alternate universe, but her own universe where they fall in love with each other or are secretly in love with each other. So clearly it's got very, very obvious parallels to the Harry Potter series, and I think that's what Rainbow Rowell intended for it to be at first. I think it was supposed to be a reimagining of, Tumblr at the time and how well beloved Harry Potter was, and this whole universe that the internet created of shipping different characters from the Harry Potter series like Draco and Hermione, and Draco and Harry, two of the most popular ships. So I think that was, what she intended it for it to be. But because this book, Fangirl, was released in 2013, which was kind of the peak of fangirl culture, especially on Tumblr and on sites like Wattpad, it really, really took off, and the characters of Simon and Baz also really took off. And I remember reading the book, and I really enjoyed, the overall story and the plot line and Kath's character, but I was also really, really hoping that maybe one day Rainbow Rowell would release a book just about Simon and Baz, as if they are, characters in their own right, rather than being part of this sort of meta world within just existing within Fangirl. And then in 2015 she actually announced that she would be publishing this book, and I cannot describe to you how excited I was, because I just didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if she would be writing it in the style of the fictional author Gemma T. Lawrence, or if she would be writing it in her own style, how these characters would turn out. And I think my biggest fear was that I would read this book expecting there to be a romance between Simon and Baz, and there wouldn't be any, and that it was just going to be another very unfortunate case of queer baiting, and she was just getting us to read the book so that I don't know what I expected, but it really, really did exceed my expectations. So I'll just kind of give a quick overview of what happens in this book. So in this version of Carry On, we actually get to meet Simon when he's already 18 years old. He's already been through many trials and tribulations off screen or off book, whatever you want to call it. And he's going back to Watford for his last year at school. And upon arriving to Watford, he realizes, and this isn't a spoiler, this is kind of like how the book begins. He realizes that Baz isn't there. And it's just, the story kind of like kicks off from there, from the fact that, Baz, hasn't arrived to school yet. So yeah, the plot follows from there, and it doesn't sound very exciting, and I think one thing about this book is that it's not a plot-oriented book. It does have elements of a plot, like, it obviously does have, like, the antagonist and the sidekicks and the romance and, like, different various plot points and reveals and things like that. But I think the way that it flows, you can tell it's kind of going through the motions, which I think Rainbow Rowell is definitely a dialogue-oriented author rather than a plot-oriented one, and I've noticed this with, the next book, Any Way the Wind Blows, which I will talk about that as well. This book definitely does have a concept that it builds upon, but I think it really takes a while for it to kind of grow or to become something that you're interested in. Because for me personally, I was reading this book for the characters. I wasn't reading for, to find out whether or not the world that Simon lives in, whether or not, it's going to get destroyed, or if Simon, beats the villain or whatever. I was mainly reading it because I was invested in the characters already, and I think that's what makes this book work, is, going into it, a lot of people were already fans of Simon and Baz because of Fangirl, and because of the precedent it had already set. So I think that's why a lot of people went into it, and a lot of people who didn't have that context, who kind of went into it blindly, might have felt that the pacing was a bit slow in the beginning. And even for us fans, there definitely is like a bit of a pacing issue, but overall I really enjoyed the dialogue in this, because I think, again, like I said, Rainbow Rowell's really good at dialogue. She knows her characters very well, even if she doesn't know her plot very well. She knows exactly, how to establish personalities, backstories and things like that. So yeah, if you're somebody who prefers, lots of heavy prose and things like that, this book might not be the best to read, because I think it relies more on, like, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it does rely definitely a lot more on dialogue and wittiness, and your kind of the reader's already preceding love for the characters. But yeah, overall this is a pretty good book to read if you want something light and quick and fast, in terms of the writing style. But if you are somebody who enjoys a bit more prose, which Harry Potter leans more towards that rather than dialogue, I think maybe steer away from this book, because I don't think you would like it as much because of that reason. Now I'm going to talk about the actual characters in this book. So the main characters that I kind of want to talk about are the four main kind of heroes, because Simon isn't the only hero in this, even though he is given much of the focus. So I will kind of be focusing on those four rather than all of the other characters, because there's just so many in here that I couldn't possibly get through all of them without spoiling some elements of the story for those of you who are watching. So I'll be talking about Simon, obviously, Baz, and Simon's best friend Penny, and finally Agatha, who is Simon's girlfriend in the book. So I'll start with Simon. So my impression of Simon from this book is I was so impressed by Rainbow's ability to draw out vulnerabilities in Simon without making it too on the nose and making it seem like really cheesy and, kind of like the standard sort of, angsty boy hero who, is going through this life crisis and things like that. I think subtlety is definitely again, one of Rainbow's strong suits when it comes to her characters. And, you know, the way she portrays Simon especially is kind of a testament to how well she knows her characters, because you really get that sense of isolation and loneliness from him, even if it's not explicitly said. You know, it is, you feel it off of, you know, his remembrance of all the things that he's fond of from Watford. You know, he makes a list of things that, you know, that you know, he wants to remember, that he holds on to when he, you know, is away from that magical world. And I think that comes across like really well throughout the whole book. And his main story arc is really just him trying to define himself and to define his identity, and that is going to be a big part, I think, for Simon's story arc across the trilogy, because it definitely isn't obviously resolved in the first book, and how could you resolve such a massive thing, you know, within the first book? But overall, I think Simon was really well done. And now next I'm going to be talking about Baz. Baz is very much a product of his time, I think. I think Rainbow Rowell did say she enjoyed writing him the most, and you can really tell that she really enjoyed writing him the most because of how many witty lines were given to him. And you could make a lot of merch from all of the kind of lines that he's given. And I think fans definitely, you know, have him at least in their top 3 favorite characters. I know I certainly did. But I think rereading it as I grew older, I think I appreciated maybe the female characters a little bit more than Baz, because I kind of grew out of my brooding, angsty boy phase, I guess. I really enjoyed reading those sorts of characters, as you can imagine, in 2013. So I think there is a lot to Baz as well. I feel like some of the tropes that were used for him were a little cliche, but Rainbow really knows how to work subtlety into who Baz is. And then there's Penny, who is Simon's best friend. I don't think she was actually ever given a specific race in Fangirl. I think, you know, we were just supposed to assume, you know, she was the default. But in this book, she's actually established as half Asian and half white. And as someone who is also half Asian and half white, that was quite a pleasant surprise for me, because, you know, there aren't a lot of there weren't a lot of mixed race characters who were half white and half Asian at the time that I could read about. So it was really interesting to read about her. But I also really liked how, you know, that wasn't a big element to who she was. It's, again, diversity is just one of those things where, you know, writers might feel compelled to write in a character who is diverse, and then, you know, then it becomes obvious that it was just shoehorned in. But it doesn't feel like that with Penny. You know, it's very much a normal part of her life. I really liked how Rainbow did her research, you know, about, because Penny's mum is Indian, so she really did her research into, you know, Indian culture, and she peppered in some really nice references to do with Hinduism and stuff like that, which I really appreciated. So I really appreciated Penny. I do think that she sort of bordered into Hermione territory a little bit in terms of the way she was presented. She's presented as, you know, the frizzy-haired, really smart girl. So there is that, you know, I guess some people could be bothered by it because of how much she resembles Hermione in her sort of like bookishness. I guess that's the problem, isn't it, when another character becomes so famous for this one specific thing, that any other characters who happen to be female and have bushy hair, who also like to read books, are immediately compared to her. But because she was supposed to be a direct parallel of Hermione, you know, it tends to feel, I guess it tends to feel a little familiar, too familiar for comfort. But I think that is resolved in the next book, which I will again talk about later. But yeah, I liked Penny. And finally, Agatha, who was perhaps the most pleasant surprise of all. Now, the reason why I really like reading Agatha's chapters nowadays is because I think Rainbow really fleshed out her character and moved her beyond the stereotype of like the blonde girlfriend who gets dumped because her boyfriend realizes he's gay, and that's it. That's all she's used for. I think Agatha definitely has a purpose in this story, other than just being, you know, the eye candy or the foil for a plot, or the Simon's beard, or, you know, things like that. I think she's treated with respect by the author. She's treated with dignity, and, you know, she's also this very frivolous, superficial person as well, which I like. I like to read about girls who are, you know, superficial, not because they're girls, but because that's just who they are. And I like that, you know, she's catty and sort of is quite a complex character in her own way, because she isn't somebody who you would, I guess she's the type of girl that gets criticized a lot for existing in literature, you know, the girly girl, the damsel in distress and things like that. And I think she recognizes that in herself as well. And I really enjoyed reading her chapters. I think she's the type of character who would kind of work really well for a feminist reading, if we wanted to do that. I think she's probably a better candidate for a more nuanced kind of take on how to present a female character in the correct way, rather than, you know, looking at the more obvious feminist characters like Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, or I don't know, Hermione Granger or something like that. I think Agatha definitely is unconventional in her femininity, which are two kind of contradictory statements in a way, but once you read the book you will understand why. So yeah, that is my overall sort of outline of how I felt about the characters, and also how I felt about the book. Now I will be moving on to the next book, and finally I will be talking about Wayward Son, which was published in 2019. Now, there was obviously a considerable gap between when Carry On was published and when Wayward Son was published. I believe Rainbow did state, you know, before the publishing of this book, or, you know, close to the publishing of this book, that she'd actually fallen quite ill in between, you know, the years of 2016 and 2019, and this book really helped to kind of help her get through that sort of, you know, illness that she had, and it's really great to know how much these characters truly mean to her. And I think you can definitely tell that she puts a lot of heart into these characters and into these stories. So let's just get straight into Wayward Son then. So this book kind of follows on, I think, about a year maybe after the events of the last book. So both Simon and Baz are 19 or 20 years old by this point. It has been quite a while since I read this book. I did read it in 2019, which was 2 years ago, and I haven't really picked it up since then. But my impressions from reading this book, well, before I get into that, let's obviously talk about the general plot. Now, this book is actually set in America, which is obviously Rainbow Rowell's home territory, so it was probably a lot easier to write this book because she knows the culture there a lot better, being American herself, and she's placing these British characters in a new setting, you know, which makes the book more interesting, because, you know, you're getting to see them interact with a whole new set of people in a whole new country, a whole new culture, and things like that. And it's basically Simon, Baz, and Penny taking a really long road trip and just going on adventures and experiencing different things together. One word to describe this book: messy. As you can imagine, this has even less of a discernible plot than Carry On does. I cannot for the life of me remember what happens in this book, apart from the road trip, because again, like, I just feel like there was no core story pinning this book down and pinning these characters to a motivation or whatever. I definitely will have to reread this before the final book gets released, but from my understanding of this book, it really is, again, just a character study, if anything else. It's a character study of Simon after being the chosen one, you know, again, you know, referring back to this whole idea of an identity crisis. This really touches upon that for Simon especially, because now he I won't spoil it actually, but you'll understand why he has an identity crisis in this. And you know, it's really testing the strength of his relationship with Baz. And you know, Penny herself, you know, struggles with her own relationship problems, you know, her own reconciliation with the fact that, you know, a relationship that she's in with, you know, somebody, a different character in this book, you know, that seems to be failing as well. And you know, reconciling herself to the fact that, you know, she doesn't have to hold on to it just because, you know, it's comfortable. And it's, yeah. So again, this is very much a character oriented, dialogue oriented book rather than plot oriented, perhaps even more so than Carry On. I think the world building is also really good in this, because it's establishing kind of magical rules in America, and you get to learn more about how magic works in, you know, in a different setting and things like that. But again, the characters, we get to learn more about them.
Obviously, that's such an obvious thing to say, but
we get to learn more about, you know, Simon and Baz's actual relationship, because in Carry On, the majority of it is them pining for each other, which is honestly a lot more interesting to read about than characters who are already in a relationship. Part of the reason why we ship people is because they haven't gotten together yet, or there's like a long period of time in which, you know, they develop feelings, and you know, there's kind of a will they won't they situation going on. And here they are together, and they're kind of battling their inner insecurities and wondering, you know, whether or not they can pull through it and things like that. It definitely is a significantly darker book, because we aren't really provided with a happy ending. We're kind of left on a cliffhanger, obviously because Rainbow knew she was writing a third book. In fact, she announced it pretty much like 2 or 3 days after this book was released, I think. I'm not sure. That's just how I remember it from memory. So, you know, when I finished this book, it wasn't frustrating because I knew there was another book coming on the way. But I know if this was the definitive ending for the book, I wouldn't have been happy with it, just because there's so many questions, so many loose ends. And I didn't get to see much of Agatha in this book as well. We don't get to hear much from her. I know that she's going to play a really big part in the next book, which Rainbow herself has already stated as well. But overall, I think out of the two books, Carry On is definitely the one that I like more, enjoyed reading more. And I think that's probably down to a number of different factors. I was a lot younger when I read it. It catered to my interests at the time. I was a lot more invested in fandom culture, and generally I thought there was more of a plot, whereas this one, I was reading it years later, and I was reading it more for nostalgia and you know, for the fact that I love these characters and I want them to have a happy ending that doesn't have like an open ending that, you know. But yeah, I'm still really excited to read the next book, because I know that whatever Rainbow has in store for us, it is going to be a surprise. It's probably going to break all of our hearts, and I am looking forward to that. So thank you so much for watching my review. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to.